The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 215.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position healers.
Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing The Abominable Snowmen. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
You got Abominable, but you didn't get my name right.
I worked so hard to get Abominable right that I let everything else in my brain go. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, if you haven't yet done so, please subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or even your favorite podcast app, or on the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. All right, so we are talking about this second Doctor story, The Abominable Snowmen, or as I like to subtitle it, The Bumbles Bounce. And this aired in September through November of 1967. It's 6 episodes in this serial, of which only one still exists in video format. That we only have the second episode preserved.
So we should talk about how we individually experienced it, so people will know what the options are. Now, obviously, there's a book adaptation of it. There are audio adaptations. The one video episode that survives, episode 2, is available on a Lost in Time DVD set that includes episodes from the Hartnell and Troughton eras that are only partial stories. So it's just, here's whatever we have from these lost stories. And I happen to have that, so I could watch episode 2 and see it by itself. Then for episode 1 and episodes 3 through 6, I watched a fan-made reconstruction on the Daily Motion website. There's a page there called El Doctorio, where they feature fan reconstructions by Loose Cannon. And these are better than a lot of fan reconstructions. What they have is a telesnap base. So these were pictures that were taken off the TV screen at the time by a guy who was hired to do this, and that's most of it. But then they add little bits of animation to it to make it more visually interesting. So if there's, let's say, I don't know, goo covering a mountain, they'll have a telesnap of goo covering a mountain, but then they'll make it pulse and glow. So there's a little bit of animation there. And sometimes they'll add completely new animation. Like if you've got 4 Yetis walking, computer animation is easy enough at home these days that they'll make an animation of 4 Yetis walking and things like that. So it's not just showing you the photos; it's a step up from that, and that's what I did. What did you guys do?
So I did the official audio soundtrack, so you can get the audio because all the audio exists for all these episodes. So you can get the audio where it's got narration in between, and it's narrated by Fraser Hines, who played Jamie. And he's got an awesome narrator voice. I mean, he's just got the voice for doing like an audiobook type format. So I did that for part 1 and then 3 through 6. And then again, on Daily Motion, you can find quasi-legal, quote unquote, copy of episode 2 that you can watch. And that's what I did. So I listened to 1, watched 2, and then listened to 3 through 6 through with the linking narration.
I listened to the Audible book version of that, like you did, Father Cory. But for the whole thing, I went 1 through 6. I like to listen on fast speed, just because I listen faster than I watch obviously. But I did look at the stuff on Dailymotion and the loose cannon reconstructions, and just to get an idea of what things looked like, because that's part of it. Is like, because what do these Yeti look like? And they are funny looking Yeti that they built.
So we may as well get that out of the way. The Yeti are apparently over in England considered one of the iconic monsters from the classic Who period, and I'm not entirely sure why, because they look like 7-foot tall furry eggplants or aubergines with arms and legs. I mean, it's like they're just wobbly furry eggplants that are huge,
and they really only showed up in the second Doctor. I mean,
this is the only time they ever show up, right?
No. They show up again.
Oh, okay.
There's another story about them, also with the Great Intelligence, called The Web of Fear, which is set in the subways. Yep. And then a Yeti also shows up in the 20th anniversary special briefly, but they're not. There are only the 2 times that they're the main monsters, and they're both in the Troughton era. They also, if you want to get a sense of what they look kind of like massive headless teddy bears with gigantic thighs. and I do not know why they wanted to make the thighs so huge. I mean, if you want it threatening, I would expect the shoulders to be huge. But no, the thighs are huge. It reminds me of the character Torgo in the movie Manos, The Hands of Fate, where Torgo is sort of meant to be maybe a satyr, but he's got under his one-piece jumpsuit, he's got these enormous knees. And it's like, why are his knees enormous?
Himalayan thunder thighs.
Yeah.
Well, I should mention, so we talked about how we experienced it. Later this year, 2021, you apparently will all be able to experience it in full animation. This is another one of the second Doctor stories that they're going to do as full animation. And I'm kind of annoyed. Evil of the Daleks, which we just talked about not that long ago, will also be available in full animation. I mean, I'll watch it, but it would have been nice to have that before our discussion. So,
it would have been nice to have everything animated before our discussions. Why don't they have everything animated yet? Come on,
get to it. What are y'all doing in lockdown?
Well, it is kind of strange that they waited this long to finally do the animation. And I think part of the reason why they did wait is it's kind of an acknowledgement of, we're not going to find any more lost episodes. We might find 1 or 2 somewhere in some private collection, but by and large, that well has been tapped.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Also, I think they've waited for the price of animation to come down, and then they're doing it piecemeal. So I think they're seeing the profitability of doing one before they do another.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Well, it will be nice to get those. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the original episode, it was written by writing pair Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln. And they did 3 stories for Doctor Who before quitting. They wrote this and the sequel to it and one more. But Henry Lincoln is the Henry Lincoln of Bajent, Lee and Lincoln, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Which then inspired the Da Vinci Code.
Wow.
So this is one of his things. Yeah.
And we talked about him in an episode of Mysterious World.
Yes, on Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I forgot about that. A couple other little behind the scenes bits. First is the character of Travers that we're going to meet in a minute. It played in this episode. It's played by Jack Watling, who is the father of Deborah Watling, who plays Victoria. So I thought that was very interesting. Also, and to kind of place this in context, this comes between when like I talked about, Evil of the Daleks, where Victoria was introduced. Or not between, comes after Evil of the Daleks. Then there was Tomb of the Cybermen, which we've talked about previously in episode 80, way back in episode 82. I can't believe how long ago it's been. And then this. So this is Victoria's 3rd appearance, her 2nd full adventure with the Doctor.
And here she's really coming into her own. In Evil of the Daleks, we saw flashes that she could be adventurous, but not it wasn't fully manifest. And then in Tomb of the Cybermen, she's just dealing with the loss of her father and her whole world. And so she's kind of been kicked back on her heels there. But here she is Miss Adventure.
Oh,
I mean, she is more adventurous
in both senses of the term.
Yeah.
misadventure. She has a bit of a misadventure.
Yes,
this as well.
Indeed, but she's more adventurous than Jamie, who comes off as the cautious one in this episode.
Yep.
So
yes,
I really like seeing this adventurous side of Victoria.
Yeah, it is good, and she kind of makes it only a few more stories before she ends up getting replaced by Zoe. But yeah, it's good to see her having this adventure here, and being a full part of the TARDIS team, the fam. So, sorry,
they didn't call him back then.
They didn't call him that.
I don't mind it.
So let's talk about the story itself. It takes place in Tibet, in the Himalayas, and in 1935, which is well before the summiting of
Mount
Everest. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of where Tibet, Himalaya, what its place was in the British mindset in the 60s, like how, and the 30s, really. You know, they're trying to recreate the mindset toward it. There seems to be a connection here because of the whole India thing, right?
Well, I would assume it was probably, at least in the popular mindset of a, kind of a very, I'm blanking on the word now, but, it's so
exotic
foreign,
and alien.
Exotic.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the word I'm trying to think of, where it's so foreign. And of course, in the 30s would have been before China had conquered Tibet, and it was still on its own. Of course, by the 60s, that was, I can't remember when the Tibetan,
they were already conquered by then.
Okay, that's what I thought. But it would be just it kind of like Deepest Darkest Africa, that kind of very similar type of popular mindset,
except with an intellectual spin because of the Buddhism. And so the British had contact with and awareness of Buddhism as a kind of an intellectual religion, but also one that was very exotic, and so it had those resonances as well. And of course, it's where the Yeti live, and there had been in England they had been aware of Tibetan and Nepalese legends, folklore about Yetis back in the 19th century. So it makes sense that Travers, the mad anthropologist, would be over there looking for one at this time, because British culture had already become aware of Yeti legends.
And the Doctor has been in Tibet several times in canonical stuff. And we'll see later in the Third Doctor's time, which we've already talked about, the Third Doctor's last episode, Planet of the Spiders, where he talks about being, showing that he's familiar with Tibetan customs. And we find out in this story that he's been to Tibet at least once before, and maybe more than that.
Well, we know more than once because he's got the Ganta, the bell. Right.
So that was the previous one, a few hundred years visit, previous to 1935. Tibet has this idea of exotic and far away and alien, and that really fits with this. They apparently filmed all this in Wales, by the way. So all the outdoor stuff in Wales is substituting for Tibet. So let's talk about.
By the way, you mentioned the Planet of the Spiders. They use that same chant, that Om Mani Padme Hum, which is the Jewel of the Lotus chant. It is actual Buddhist and Hindu chant.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was wondering
now, whether or not they're using it properly is another story. But
yeah.
Well, it's not meant to distract you from mind control efforts by the great intelligence. That's not its real world function.
Right.
Oh, right. So it opens with this Professor Travers, an anthropologist, and another man camping on a mountainside, being attacked by a Yeti, which we'll find later is a Yeti, and Travers runs screaming into the night, and that's the cold open. And then we have the TARDIS, where the Doctor and Jamie and Victoria, and the Doctor's very excited about visiting the Himalayas, and Jamie, as a what was it, 18th century Scotsman?
18th century.
Is not familiar with the Himalayas at all. He doesn't know if it's even on Earth, where they are. And it's Victoria, who is the 19th century English woman, has to explain to him what the Himalayas are. So, and the Doctor is looking for a very specific item that he wants to take to this Det Sen monastery that's nearby. And I like the fact that as they're searching for it, Jamie comes upon some broken bagpipes.
Yeah.
And says, "Doctor, you didn't tell me about these. I could fix them easily." And the doctor says, "Yes, I was afraid of that." I just thought that was a great little bit. But so the doctor puts on his big fur coat, which plays into the story, and goes out exploring and wants Jamie and Victoria to keep looking for this special Tibetan bell that he has somewhere on the TARDIS.
Which they call a ganta, which is a real word for this kind of bell in the real world. But it's used in the Hindu community. Oh. As far as I can tell, in Tibetan Buddhism, this kind of bell is not called a ganta, but a drilbu.
Interesting. Little mix-up, or just maybe they thought ganta was a better word and said, whatever, no one will notice.
It probably was a word that if people were familiar with it, they would recognize more than they will drilbu.
Right, that's possible. So after the doctor,
I like though that after the doctor goes, Victoria is using the controls on the console to adjust the scanner angle.
Yes,
it's like, go 19th century girl. That's awesome. You're already learning how to control the TARDIS.
And the doctor, having seen evidence of something big on the mountainside that's unknown, tells Jamie and Victoria, "You stay here in the TARDIS. I'm going to go. But you guys stay inside. It's safer that way." Which, of course, being companions, has a companion ever listened to the doctor when he said stay in the TARDIS?
Well, temporarily. I mean, Jamie wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But they don't listen to the doctor when he tells them to stay in the TARDIS. They don't listen to the doctor when he tells them to stay away. They don't listen. How many times does he say do this, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to ignore you, doctor."
In fairness, when he says, "When I say run," they usually run.
Well,
that's true.
Well, the fact is, given the type of people that the doctor chooses to travel with him, they aren't the type of people who are likely to stay behind and not see something interesting and go after it. So that's just the fact.
And they play with that, especially in the Seventh Doctor's time, where it's like, "Ace, do you have any of that Nitro 9 you told me you're not carrying?"
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So the doctor shows up at the monastery, but gets this hostile welcome from the monks and Travers, the man from the campsite. They think that the doctor
runs across a dead body. Doctor gets blamed.
Yep.
Right. He's accused of of attacking Travers and killing the other man because
he's in a big fur coat. It's like everyone on this mountain. You mean?
Yeah.
Right. And he's twisted the rifle into a pretzel. No. In any case, while that's happening, Victoria and Jamie have tracked these giant footprints in the snow to a cave, and then Jamie thinks the cave looks like someone has built it. They go inside, and then the Yeti seals the cave behind them with a large boulder, and so they're stuck inside. Meanwhile, Travers thinks that the doctor is a newspaper man who mocked him for when he set out on his expedition to find the Yeti, but now is trying to take all the credit and glory for finding Yeti by killing. Like, it's just this bizarre, mentally imbalanced accusation.
Travers is living up to his reputation as the mad anthropologist at this point.
Yes. Yeah. And the monks, they have this one, like the warrior chief. Apparently, these monks have warriors to defend the monastery.
Yeah, I'm not clear on the realism of that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem all that kosher. But so Crisong is the head of the warriors, and he's very aggressive, very, doesn't believe the doctor, doesn't trust anybody.
Oh, I love, though, at one point he wants to believe Travers because Travers is an Englishman.
I was going to say something about that.
Like,
yeah.
Okay, this is a little bit. Hesitate to use the R word here, but the writing seems to be a little racist on this point.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if you're going to do that, at least be consistent. The doctor comes across as an Englishman too. What do you call that accent?
And they even mention it. They even mention it in the episode that he's from England.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was maybe just a little of the imperial superiority coming across a bit,
something like that. I don't know exactly how you want to phrase it, but it's like, oh wow.
Yes.
Normally people aren't so trusting of outsiders.
Unless they happen to be, this Englishman. Crisong wants to kill the doctor because he doesn't really care so much about Travers's campsite friend. but something's also killed 4 of the monks. And so he wants to, Chris Song has decided without trial or evidence that the doctor must be responsible, therefore he must die. But the other monks, a little more, maybe we should pray about this and consult the abbot and, and see what we really should do. Follow our path of nonviolence.
Right.
In any case, while the doctor is being hauled off to the Husgau, Jamie is in the cave, and he follows the cave tunnel down and finds a room with a pyramid of small silver spheres, which have the ability to roll about on their own.
Well, they're Horta eggs at first.
Yes.
You're in a cave, you find the small metallic spheres. They're obviously Horta eggs. But then it turns out that one of them is the Bet sphere because it can move on its own.
I was going to bring that up. And so I'm like looking at it going, it's the Bet sphere. That's where it's come from. It's come from the Himalayas. So anyway, at this point, they're not rolling around on their own. But it's this little weird pyramid of balls. And so then the Yeti comes back and attacks. And so Jamie has to go help Victoria. They end up collapsing the roof of the
Jamie
cave.
takes one of the spheres.
Yes, because as you do.
Yeah.
And then they collapse the roof of the cave onto the Yeti, and it appears to be crushed and dead, except then it starts moving and climbing out of underneath the tons of rock somehow. The doctor reveals to the young monk Tomni, who is one of the warrior monks under Chrisong, but seems to be a lot more level-headed, a little less bloodthirsty. And he reveals to him that he's been at the monastery before when it was attacked in 1630, and that he has the bell that the doctor was looking for, the Ganta, was thought to have been stolen, but was placed in the doctor's safekeeping, and he's bringing it back and should be welcomed having seen it. So this is this interesting story that we have sort of in the background here of the doctor's previous visit. We don't know who attacked the monastery, why the doctor has this bell. That's all sort of left unmentioned.
It's dealt with in spin-off media. The title to look for is Night of the Intelligence.
In Big Finish?
Not Big Finish, it's prose.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Nice.
So, so the Chrisong is going to use the doctor as bait for the Yeti. He's going to tie him up outside.
The doctor
King Kong
is Yeti bait.
Yes, it's like something like out of King Kong, where they tie up what's her name, Fay Ray, outside for the Kong to come get her. And one of the things that's going on here is the Yeti are supposed to be these timid, peaceful creatures and not these savage beasts, and so they think maybe the doctor has turned them into savage beasts. Like the reasons why they want to kill the doctor keep shifting every time we see them.
And they don't last that long. So initially, we have the usual certain parties are adamantly hostile against the doctor, like Chrisong and Travers, while other parties like Thomni and the abbot are favorable to the doctor. Yes. So far, everything is playing out as normal. But in episode 2, that starts to change because Travers has gone out to look for Yeti, and he runs across Jamie and Victoria, and when he learns that they have actually found the cave of the Yeti and are willing to take him there, and they're clearly associates of the doctor, this revolutionizes Travers' attitude towards the doctor, and he concludes the doctor was telling the truth. And hereafter, Travers is now a supporter of the doctor. Also, when the Yetis come to attack, as the story progresses, the doctor clearly acts, and his companions act, to defend the monastery, which flips Chrisong. So Chrisong, by later in the story, is now also a doctor supporter. And who the doctor opponents are flips. So initially the abbot is seems to be very reasonable and on the doctor's side, but later the abbot kind of flips and becomes antagonistic. And so I find this very interesting. Even though this is a 6-parter that has one location, I mean, we talked in Evil of the Daleks about how that felt interesting all the way through, even though it was a 6-parter, because it had these 3 very different locations they traveled to. Here, it's all one setting, but I still find this interesting. I mean, as we're rounding the corner my initial plan was, okay, I'm going to watch 2 episodes one day, 2 episodes another day, 2 episodes a third day, so I don't have to watch it all at once because it's a 6-parter. Well, I watched 2 episodes the first day, and then I came back the second day, and I watched 2 episodes, and it's like, I want to keep going. I watched, let's do at least another one. I did episode 5. At the end of episode 5, I want to see what happens next. Let's do episode 6.
Right.
So it's an interesting story, and it operates on a somewhat more psychological level, because you have this human interest with people, changing sides and what are their motives and stuff. It also is interesting for a few production reasons. There's no music in this, although we do sometimes. There's no music soundtrack to tell you what to feel, and that can help conjure this bleak mountainside environment that was meant to be snowy, but they didn't have snow in August in Wales. They only had rain. And it sometimes you'll hear chanting, as part of the background, but that's not a typical TV soundtrack. Sometimes they will have the set minimally lit by like torchlight. And the set itself, when you see it in full light, is really impressive. They've got these ornate columns. They've got a giant Buddha statue. They have interesting costumes on the monks. So it's visually interesting, and for a 6-parter, I was quite impressed with it. Normally, I don't like 6-parters.
Yeah, there are times when you can tell they're suffering from small soundstage syndrome, meaning they didn't have a lot of space to put the sets in, but they did a good job with it too, though. So that it does have a bit more of an expansive feel, even though you can kind of tell that they're just reusing different parts of the set in different ways to make it look bigger than it is. But no, I agree with you, Jimmy. I mean, it really was, listening to it was very, very interesting, that the story moved fairly quickly. And there was some still running through corridors, or in some cases running down the mountain, but it wasn't quite as bad as some episodes where there's half an episode is just running constantly.
Yeah. And there was a large cast. There were a lot of characters, a lot of different characters, not so many major characters with lots of lines, but there were plenty of different points of view, several different monks, including monks. Once Chryson gets on the doctor's side, then there's this other monk who turns out to be the part of the Nemesis team, the opposing team from the Doctor, and that sort of thing. So there's a very interesting, and in fact, we encounter at around this point another part of the opposing team here, with this very interesting figure who, so when Tomney brings the bell to the abbot in the inner sanctum, which only the abbot is supposed to go into, there's this voice at first, just this disembodied voice of the master. And I wasn't sure whether it was supposed to be a spiritual thing at first, or whether it turns out it's this monk who's ancient, hundreds of years old, who was there when the Doctor was there 300 years earlier, called Padmasambhava. And so he's got this disembodied voice that keeps changing. It's very much like a Gollum Schmeagol thing going on, where it seems like there's 2 personalities at work. But in fact, one of them turns out to be the Great Intelligence talking through.
Yeah. And in a way, it's a pity the Master hadn't been invented yet, because hypnotism plays a huge role in this story. And this could be a classic Master story.
Right.
Where you've got the master hypnotizing people and controlling the Yeti, which, would be the other thing, because the Master's just a madman with a box.
Right.
He needs an army to serve him, which would be the Yeti in this case.
Right.
But the Master hasn't been invented, and so even though they're constantly talking about the Master, it's not who you think. It's the hundreds of year old Lama that the monastery has. And I'm not sure about the authors tried to be true to the way Buddhist stuff works. I'm not sure they entirely succeeded always. Like, if you've got an abbot, why do you have this Lama guy as well?
Yeah.
Because Lamas are typically like the highest ranking guy, but so are abbots.
Yeah.
In a Buddhist monastery. So I'm not sure about that. Also, there's a bit of a religious issue concerning who this guy is. In Tibetan Buddhism, Padmasambhava is a real guy. he's the second Buddha after after Siddhartha Gautama. There are all kinds of biographies about him. He's a major figure in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's going to turn out, and this is the reason he's got the Golem Smeagol thing going on, is the great intelligence has been possessing him for hundreds of years. It's enslaved him, and it periodically takes control, and it sets limits on what he can do, and it forces him to do certain things. And there's not an exact equivalent to this in the Christian religion, but Padmasambhava is a major Buddhist religious figure in Tibetan Buddhism. This is a little bit like saying the patriarch Abraham was possessed by a space intelligence and forced to do things.
Yeah.
If it's the same guy, and it may be because he's hundreds of years old. On the other hand, maybe it's someone who's named after him, but it's unclear.
The TARDIS wiki says that this is the Padmasambhava who, for centuries traveled the higher realms and was revered as Rinpoche, and then returned to the physical plane in 1625 at the Detsen monastery, at which point the Doctor showed up. So,
that's based partly off spin-off media.
Okay.
I saw that, but they never establish on screen in this episode, is he the second Buddha of Tibetan Buddhism?
Okay, I see. Yeah.
But they say enough about him, he could be. And this is a little bit like in, having Abraham or Moses or someone possessed by an alien intelligence.
It's very tricky and probably would never be done today.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, in any case, he seems to think favorably of the Doctor, at least at first. Well, Padmasambhava does. Yeah, thinks favorably of the Doctor. But the great intelligence, which is possessing him, does not. Obviously, he's a bad guy. He's evil. So you have him sort of swaying back and forth. But he does give the order to the abbot that the Doctor and his companion should be treated with kindness and gentleness, and that's sort of what releases the Doctor from his accusations.
And this is another part of what makes this interesting, because just like Travers and Chrysong have now flipped and become Doctor supporters, we're seeing ambivalence on the part of their former protectors, which was the abbot and Padmasambhava, under the influence of the intelligence. Speaking of the intelligence itself, I really like the way the intelligence is used as a villain in this story. I like it a lot better than anything Stephen Moffat did with the great intelligence.
Right. We should mention that it shows up in the Christmas special that we'll cover at some point with the 11th Doctor, called The Snowmen.
Right. And it shows up in The Name of the Doctor, where the great intelligence forces the 11th Doctor to the planet Trenzalore in hopes of killing him and destroying his timeline, and Clara the Impossible Girl saves him.
Right.
And the intelligence, I think, also is in that Spoonhead's AI episode early on in the Clara run. In any event, the great intelligence is a disembodied intelligence. It does not have a native physical form. It's from another dimension, apparently. But it wants a physical form in our and stuff in our universe, because our universe is where all the good stuff is. And so it has been manipulating Padmasambhava for centuries, and he's got this weird-looking face as a result of that. Which is, they don't really explain it. It's just another creepy aspect. He's obviously done something to the face of this Buddhist Lama, and he's not always in control of him. And as a result of that, we have this slow build to the introduction and the full revelation of the intelligence. And that's a device I look for in fiction. It is characters that are being alluded to and mentioned, but we don't meet, because then when we do meet them, it's very impactful. It's like in the movie The Third Man, where you're hearing about, the main character goes to Vienna, Austria after World War II. He's looking for his friend Harry Lime, but Harry Lime has died. You keep hearing about Harry Lime for the first half of the movie, and then wham, Harry Lime is alive. And that is very impactful. And Orson Welles even talked about how the best roles are the ones where you have this long build-up before the character finally emerges.
Right.
And that's what we have here with the Great Intelligence. He's not flouncing around being evil like he is in the Stephen Moffat era. We have this long build of, him in the background slowly coming out before the big reveal at the end, and it's much more satisfying as a result.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, there is this talk by Padmasambhava about the doctor is very very intelligent, but he could hinder the great plan, and we don't know what the great plan is yet at this point. Presumably, it involves the great intelligence doing something evil to the Earth, but there is some great plan at work. So there's this conflict,
and there's ambiguity, because at one point the doctor says something like that could imply this could threaten the whole world, but on the other hand, all we ever see is the great intelligence wants this mountain. He just wants to be a big glop of goo covering this mountain.
Right, yeah.
Which makes this episode a property rights issue.
Right. Possession, 9/10 of the law. So Travers...
Ooh, in both senses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Travers ends up bringing Jamie, after encountering Jamie and Victoria on the mountain, brings them to the monastery and tries to tell the monks that it was all a mistake. They're not at fault here. But Chryson wants to string them up too anyway as bait. Eventually, then the Tommy shows up with the abbot's order to be nice to them. Eventually, some Yeti show up, and the doctor wants to capture one. Jamie comes up with a plan to capture one of them. They get it in a net.
There's a great line here.
I love this one.
Jamie has thought of his plan, and the doctor doesn't know what it is, but the doctor turns and says, Victoria, I think this is one of those instances where discretion is the better part of valor. Jamie has an idea. Come along.
Yeah. Whatever Jamie's idea is, we should back up. So they captured a net, and it stops moving, so they think it's dead. But then the doctor figures out that the Yeti, once they get inside and they examine it, is a robot. It's made of metal. And outside, we see that one of those silver spheres has fallen out of the Yeti. His USB drive has gotten disconnected.
Serious design flaw.
It is a bad design flaw, and it's stuck in the snow or the mud or whatever.
I shall build my robot warriors that have a control device that can fall out of their chest whenever they go into battle.
I'll make it round so it rolls really easy out of the chest cavity. So they find the little hole, and they don't know what it's for at first because they haven't seen the sphere. And then the sphere outside starts communicating with the sphere that Jamie brought that's inside. So there's a lot of back and forth here. Yeah,
there's back and forth, but the basic idea is the one outside is stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
So it can't. These spheres want to get back. The control units or spheres want to get back into the Yeti so they can carry out their orders. And the one outside is stuck in the mud, so it starts talking to the one inside and alerts it to the fact that the Yeti is missing its control device, and so now it's going to sneak around the monastery and eventually get back in the Yeti.
Right, for like the next episode or so, it's like it's sneaking around as people walk by. It'll sneak down the corridor as when they're not looking, that sort of thing. I do like Victoria has when they can't find the sphere when it's gone missing. They think Travers took it to go look for the Robo Yetis, and Victoria has a great line that says, "Well, one thing's for certain, it didn't walk away on its own." Well, actually, it did.
Yeah, it didn't walk away; it rolled away.
It's the Bet sphere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want to know what that is, go listen to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. We have an episode on this mysterious object found by the Betts family that would apparently roll around on its own
and do all kinds of interesting things. Yes, and no one knows why and how. And we also see that Padmasambhava has this game board in his inner sanctum, and with figures on it and a model of the monastery. And so he's apparently controlling the Robo Yeti using these figures on the game board. They're sort of like a remote control for them. If he moves them into the monastery, they attack the monastery. If he moves them out, that sort of thing. So there's a bit of control going on here with him.
By the way, the discovery that this Yeti, this fierce Yeti, is a robot is good news for Travers.
Yes.
Because now Travers realizes, if the reason the Yeti have been fierce lately is because they're all robots, that means the timid Yeti that I want to discover could just be in hiding.
Right.
And so I can continue my survey. So that's good news for him. One thing I found very interesting now, I didn't think to look for it in episode 2, but you guys can tell me if it's there in the audio versions you listen to. When the Yeti show up, and there's this lub-dub, rapid, lub-dub, 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 lub-dub thing that's kind of reminiscent of a heart, but also sounds kind of mechanical sound effect that signifies that the Yeti are present and active. I found that an effective piece of sound design because it's nice to have this unnerving, sort of familiar, this is kind of like a heartbeat, but it's not a heartbeat, noise to signify the presence of these sinister robots.
I remember hearing it, especially with the spheres communicating with each other. When they're active, they make this noise. I remember that part. Yeah, and then having them present with the Yeti, that is kind of an effective connection and showing that these are something strange present. It's not, besides just being an abominable snowman, it's something even more strange and perhaps mechanical or something like that. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty effective.
Yeah, and I don't remember hearing it much beyond part 2, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't there, because of course stuff like that can kind of become background noise, which is the point of it. It's meant to be. Although it is funny where the things rolling, the spears are rolling around, making this noise, and people walk right past. It's like, well, I don't hear anything.
I always assume in those cases it's like when you hear explosions in space that are really loud. The microphone is inside the thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, this is what it would sound like if I was in the exploding spaceship, or this is what it would sound like if I was inside the little sphere that's sneaking by.
Right.
The design of the sphere I saw in a little behind-the-scenes snippet was kind of interesting because, in 1967, they didn't have, Arduinos and all the little microcontrollers we have, but they did manage to make this remote-controlled, radio-controlled device. It doesn't roll like on a gyroscope inside. There's actual wheels on the bottom that they used. Yeah,
little
but they're
caterpillar treads.
Yeah, it's hard to see from the full view of the camera, but it was very clever.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we mentioned, Victoria's misadventures earlier, despite Tomney's repeated admonition that the sanctum is taboo, you are not allowed there, it is forbidden, she cavalierly insists on allowing her curiosity to bring her to that sanctum and to go sneak inside. Like, no, you're not allowed in there. That is rude. No,
it's not only rude, it's sacrilegious.
Yes.
Yeah. And she repeatedly says, well, I don't understand why I can't go in there. Well, how about because you were told you can't go in there? Is that a good enough reason?
What are you, 5? Come on. Oh, meanwhile, Padmasambhava tells the abbot, Songston, to bring this small crystal-looking pyramid that he produces from behind his throne to the cave where it will allow the great intelligence to take on physical form on Earth. And as we mentioned, so at this point I was writing down where we'd seen the great intelligence in the 2012 Christmas episode. That it'll be back in the Second Doctor's time in the Web of Fear, which will also include the Yeti and some of these other characters.
Well, and that also includes Lethbridge Stewart.
Right, his first appearance. So we've got that, and then we've got the other one, the Trenzalore episode, which was
Name of the Doctor.
Name of the Doctor. So so it's,
and I think it's also in the Spoonheads Wi-Fi episode.
The Bells of St. John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was the one I looked up while we were talking. Okay, so the Doctor and Jamie have to go back to the TARDIS to get some tracking equipment. They want to track the radio signals.
For once. It's like the TARDIS is a technological wonderland. It's got to have all kinds of useful gadgets in there that could help you resolve situations. I love the fact that for once they think, oh, we have something on the TARDIS that could help with this. Let's go get it.
Right. And while they're doing that, the sphere in the monastery eventually gets into the deactivated Yeti and reactivates it, and it starts wrecking the place until it can leave the monastery.
As Victoria's standing there is when it comes to life. She's in that room.
Right, which leads Chris Song to then, again, or somebody, I don't think it's Chris Song, maybe somebody else, to suspect that Victoria is the she-devil who's controlling the Robo-Yeti based on zero evidence, just proximity to the thing when it comes alive.
Right. We should also mention, that with a lot of the mind control and stuff that's going on. That there's a couple of times, Victoria's one of them. That Tomini is another one where you forgot that I'm here, or you forget that you've ever been in this room, and that the abbot uses this several times to come and go from the abbey
to get past a guard.
Yeah, to get past the guard to go to the cave. But this is one of those times where we see that happen, where she forgets that she was in this room.
These Yeti aren't the robots you're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. I was going to say that. Yes, the TV hypnotism, which is so effective. In any case, the doctor and Jamie on the mountain, they find 3 inanimate Yetis standing around, and as they're there, they see the Yeti reactivate. Actually, I don't think they see them reactivate. They leave, and then the Yeti reactivate and surround the abbot who's carrying the pyramid under hypnosis to the cave.
And Travers follows them to the cave.
Right, where he goes in, and as this pyramid is activating, it emits this sound and light, and Travers is overcome with it.
We should say this pyramid is, because when you think pyramid, you think Khufu's pyramid on Giza, which is massive and too big to carry. This is a much, much, much smaller pyramid that is portable.
Right.
It's like maybe a foot on each side.
Right.
And it's glass, or clear anyway. And so when the abbot goes into the under the influence of hypnotism, goes into the cave, he puts it in the center of a group of the spheres that he's arranged, and then it activates, it starts glowing, and it starts emitting goo.
Yes, it's the goo pyramid. Worst pyramid ever. So the Dr. Jamie have got to the TARDIS. There's a Yeti, an inanimate Yeti, guarding it. So he goes up to it to see if it's alive, which seems like a little precipitous. And he ends up using his screwdriver to remove the control sphere, but not that screwdriver. This is just a regular old...
This regular, real, boring, non-sonic screwdriver.
Yes. The Sonic doesn't show up for the first time for a couple stories. In fact, this season it'll show up, but not till later, right? I think it is.
And the Doctor even shows up in Fury from the Deep.
Yeah.
Doctor even says, who would attack a Yeti with a screwdriver?
Right. Yeah, because Jamie says, why... Jamie points out the design flaw. Like, why would you put this thing right there on the front of it where anyone could find it and realize it's a robot and not a Yeti? It's like, who's going to approach a Yeti with a screwdriver to unscrew that?
We then have a little misadventure here where and this is how they learned that the spheres move, because now that they've taken the sphere out of this Yeti, it wants to get back in. It's got this Jones to get back inside its big robotic body. And Jamie is having trouble restraining the sphere from doing that. And it kind of takes both of them to do it. Eventually, Jamie hands it to the doctor. And as the doctor is restraining the sphere from getting back inside the Yeti, he tells Jamie to get a rock and put it in the chest control slot so the sphere can't get in there.
Right.
And Jamie does that, meaning that he has now given this Yeti a heart of stone.
Oh.
I will take your heart of silver spear and replace it with a heart of stone. So Padmasambhava is now he's got the abbot back, and he's expostulating about, giving us some exposition on the story so far. He tells them that great intelligence is taking form, but it needs room to expand, sort of like Khrushchev at the UN. And so the monks must leave the monastery now because the great intelligence is going to take over the whole mountain. It's not just the cave.
And this is actually, not as evil as it could be. At least he's given him notice. He could just grow goo all over and suffocate everybody.
He's
letting him get out.
Right. It's not an evil intelligence. It's just like a kind of a bad intelligence. Yeah. Victoria and Tomni have been locked up as suspects in the reactivation of the Robo Yeti, and he doesn't want her. Well, they're not really locked up. They're being kept in the cells, but I think it's unlocked. It was unclear from the listening to it, but she ends up tricking Tomni into escaping from the cell so she can go back to the inner sanctum again, because that's her thing. And Chrisong, meanwhile, refuses to leave the monastery. I will not obey the abbot. I'm going to drive these Yeti away, because the abbot's excuse for why we have to leave the monastery is we just can't defeat these bad Yeti, and we can't risk losing anymore.
Song's got kind of a habit of this, though, of disobedience. Like early on when he wants to kill the doctor, he says, "You must always consult the abbot before I take decisive action."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's kind of your job.
That's kind of the thing. You obey the abbot, right? It's because you're not.
And eventually he does. There's a scene where he admits that he is being disobedient, and
right,
which is good.
Victoria gets hypnotized again by Padmasambhava, who programs her at this point with a post-hypnotic suggestion.
Yeah, and I love so it's again it's he's not just being completely evil. It's like he's hypnotizing her to help get everyone out,
right,
before the intelligence covers the mountain. And so he gives her 2 instructions. One of them is to take the bell and give it to the monks and have Padmasambhava speak through her to the monks and tell them to leave. And as their revered founder, saying, "Here's the bell, get out of here.
Right.
Go found a new monastery elsewhere."
Mm-hmm.
They'll take that seriously, especially when it's delivered in this fantastic fashion with his voice coming out of the little girl, and it's like he's never addressed us directly in this way before. So they'll take it very seriously. And then secondly, Victoria is hypnotized to, after she's delivered the bell and the message to the monks, she's to wait for the doctor. And when she hears the doctor's voice, she's supposed to say, "Doctor, there is great danger. You must take me away. Take me away. Take me away." And unfortunately, that's all that she's programmed to say when she hears the doctor's voice. So every time Patrick Troughton speaks, Victoria says, "Doctor, there is great danger. You must take me away. Take me away. Take me away."
It becomes pretty clear very quickly this isn't authentic Victoria speaking.
Well, we could tell at that point the Vashta got a hold of her, and that's all she had left.
Yeah, that's her ghost signal.
Hey, who turned out the lights?
So, and Padmasambhava, speaking to Victoria, does also repeat, "The doctor and the companions are blameless and innocent and must be carried away to safety." So again, I think it's the good Padmasambhava fighting against the bad great intelligence, and there's this internal war going on for him that he's losing.
And that's what makes it so interesting, is because we don't have just unalloyed evil here.
Right. When the doctor goes to talk to Padmasambhava, this is when the Padma reveals that he astral traveled, and that's when he made mental contact with the great intelligence, which now controls his mind and body. There's a moment where he seems to die.
As we're going to talk about on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, out-of-body travel involves certain dangers. Be careful about what strange intelligences you talk to on the astral plane.
That's right. So, so at the conclusion of their conversation, the Padmasambhava appears to die, but it's only a ruse. He's not really dead yet. Not dead yet. I think I'll go for a walk. The doctor knows that this growing fear in Victoria is designed to get him to take her away from the monastery, and if he doesn't take her away, she might go mad. That's a real danger. And Jamie's like, you're taking a big risk with Victoria here, like, doctor. Are you sure we should be doing this? But he does give her this new post-hypnotic suggestion to forget the previous one. He takes her back, regresses her in her memory to before she was hypnotized by Padmasambhava.
So he does a system restore, Windows system restore on Reboot, her memory.
Yeah. Control
and starts to hypnotize Jamie too at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes.
As he's doing the suggestion for her to sleep, he has to go, "Jamie, what's going on?"
Yeah. Oh, not you, Jamie. So he finds a system restore point from before she was hypnotized by the great intelligence and resets her memory to there, so she only remembers up to that point. She doesn't remember being hypnotized by the great intelligence, and thus loses the corrupt data that he fed into the system.
Right.
And it basically makes her think that she just kind of dozed off there in the chair.
And she's coming into wake mode now.
That's right. And so now the monks have to come to terms with the abbot as being controlled by Padmasambhava and the Great Intelligence, and that Padmasambhava has been controlled by the Great Intelligence.
Oh, the specific line, with regard to the abbot, Thomni says, he was put in a trance by the master.
Yes. That seems prophetic.
Yeah, this certainly would work as a master story. Every time they mention the master, I keep thinking of that.
Right. So some of the monks are going to leave, but Travers and another monk have decided to go attack the Great Intelligence in its cave where it's oozing.
Oh, and another point of consonance. So the Great Intelligence is masquerading itself as Padmasambhava. Well, the master loves to hide his identity too.
Right. Especially as ancient wise beings.
I almost wonder if it isn't a coincidence, though, that because there's only a couple of years later that we find the master, that we see the master, that he appears. Yeah. I almost wonder if they said, we had this idea back here. Maybe we could make that a person instead. Yeah.
The Great Intelligence
because, like you said, there's a lot of coincidences, and and let's be honest, Doctor Who's good at stealing from its own history still. So
right. So the Doctor has figured out that there's a control room that inside the inner sanctum that's controlling everything, including the Yeti, and they need to get in there. So he has to engage in mental / psychic combat with the Great Intelligence, so that Jamie and Thomni can sneak past and get into the control room. But as they're doing this, Padmasambhava brings the Yeti in to the monastery, and Victoria has to come help. She gets hypnotized, but by reciting the Lotus Prayer we mentioned, she fights it.
Oh, so this was something the Doctor, had suggested that Thomni teach Victoria as a distraction, so she could focus on something if the Great Intelligence tries to hypnotize her again.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, she's from 19th century England. I'm pretty sure she knows another religious formula she can say.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
She doesn't need any special training or worry, am I going to forget part of this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Jamie he has to smash a sphere that he finds. That stops the Yeti, but it doesn't stop the Great Intelligence. They realize they have to destroy that there's another pyramid in the control room. And so Jamie and Thomni just go to town on this control room. They start smashing everything in sight. Let's go, Thomni. Let's go to work. And I think he literally uses that phrase, let's go to work.
And there's some great stuff in this sequence. This is a very tense ending as everything is building. I mean, we have the Yeti attacking. We have the glowing goo spreading all over the mountain. The principals are alone because the monks have left.
Yes.
So this is like just the Doctor, Jamie, Thomni, and Victoria taking on the Great Intelligence. And they don't know it, but Travers is coming back too. But it's the main cast has been severely thinned out. This is really tough. The Doctor is out of action because he's got to keep using his mind to block the Great Intelligence. And that means the least experienced people are having to do the physical stuff. And they're smashing stuff, not really knowing. And this is part of the problem. Jamie doesn't really know what to smash.
Right.
And that's why this goes on as long as it does, because some of the equipment he's destroying is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Padmasambhava is more under the control of the Great Intelligence. And he, at one point when Travers comes in and fires a gun at him, he telekinetically stops the bullet.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, this is really a tense confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot to mention also, previously, the Great Intelligence through Padmasambhava gets the Songston, the abbot, to kill Chrisong. So there's a scene where he ends up killing him after Chrisong has redeemed himself.
So the security chief is the red shirt in this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So they end up destroying the console, destroying the pyramid, which destroys stops the Great Intelligence, doesn't destroy it, but destroys its physical manifestation on the mountain. And afterward,
when they smash the pyramid.
The pyramid. And afterward, Padmasambhava, who's now released, is now going to be able to die, finally, that he's been asking. That was the promise that the Great Intelligence made is after we've finished the Great Plan, I'll let you die. But at some point he realized that was a lie, that he wasn't going to be allowed to rest. And so now he's dying, and thanks to the Doctor for bringing him peace as he dies.
And what they filmed was a scene of his face melting.
Ooh.
But it was considered too disturbing to be broadcast at the time, so it was cut from the broadcast version, though it still exists. And you can look at outtakes and watch his face melt. I'm hoping that this will be restored in the animation that comes out next year.
Yeah, animation should make it a little more less intense, so that they can do that.
Well, I mean, it was always just a face mask with goo dripping out of it, but
yeah.
I was gonna say, does it look anything like the Indiana Jones Nazi face melt? Or...
No, it's not that intense. It's much more low key.
I mean, I saw that when I was 12, and that's left an impression.
Oh yeah.
So as they are leaving the monastery, the Doctor and companions and Travers, this is when they actually see a real Yeti.
And they have Tomney sound the monastery gong to tell the monks it's okay to come back.
Right. So they see a real Yeti, timid. It runs away because it's scared of them.
And Travers scampers after it.
Yes. Yeah. Yahoo! It's like Yukon Cornelius going out into the wilderness. And he chases after him up the mountain, and he's renewing his mad travels to find the Yeti and document it. And that's where we end. They go back into the TARDIS, and they're off to their next journey. Hopefully, as Jamie... there is a nice thing about Jamie's been wearing a kilt the entire time. And so he's a little cold, and his knees are blue, and I think the Doctor says...
perfectly horrible sight.
Yes, what a horrible sight of your blue knees. Let's go someplace warm. So
hopefully,
hopefully, and that's where they end it. So last thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
Enjoyed the episode a bunch. Being able to see the second episode, the broadcast, video of it, really kind of renews my wish that somehow we could that these episodes would show up. But again, like I said at the beginning, it's probably, unless like one or two happen to show up in some private collection somewhere, it's not likely. So look forward to the animation to get to see this as an actual video episode.
Jimmy?
Like I said, I really enjoyed this story much more than I expected to, given that it's a 6-parter. I liked the atmosphere. I liked the complexity of the characters involved, where you have the cardboard bad guys flip to become good guys, and you have the cardboard good guys become ambiguous.
Yep.
I liked Victoria's sense of adventure in this. I liked the set. The set was very impressive. By the way, at one point they have the Buddha statue fall over and kill somebody.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like the sound design with the lack of music, but the sound effects like the lub-dub whenever the Yeti are around and active, or at least their spheres are. There's just a lot of clever stuff here. One thing I noticed is after the Doctor finally, once he's inside the monastery and he gets out of his big fur coat, which is iconic for the second Doctor, it's one of his iconic looks. He's wearing a huge, enormous, elaborate, ornate scarf.
Right.
That's right.
It's not quite Tom Baker length, but it's big and fancy. So apparently that's something that can run through incarnations.
Interesting. One of the things I saw while I was looking up this episode, and in fact it's in the Daily Motion reconstruction, is some behind-the-scenes material, including an interview with a woman who was a production assistant on this serial. And she talks about how the filming this on location in Wales was really difficult because of that aforementioned rain and everything, and how the cameraman, they had a limited amount of time, a small window of time. They weren't sure they could film it all, and the director of photography put the camera on his back and carried it all over and got all the shots. And she says it's such a shame that all of that is gone, because all we have is the second episode, and so that is a shame that all of that work is lost. But we will preserve it. Hopefully, they can figure out a way to preserve it in some way through animation in some form.
Yeah. One thing that I've read about this, and I don't know if this is true 100%, but it is one of the things that's said about this episode. So The Yeti costumes are fur over a bamboo frame, and with padding for the performer inside. And allegedly, now because of the rain, the ground was slippery, and they would constantly the Yeti actors would constantly be falling down in their costumes, and they'd have to pick them up and blow dry the fur and brush it out and fluff them up again.
Right.
But allegedly, one of the performers, because they're on a mountain, one of the performers fell hundreds of feet.
Oh, wow.
And was feared dead. But he was like drunk and partially relaxed and also in this bamboo padded suit and survived.
Wow.
Impressive.
The angels preserve the fools and small children.
Yeah.
All right. So let's, I think we should wrap it up there. We do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Anna D., Gerard T., Buck and Julianne T., Daniel R., and Mark A. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of the Abominable Snowmen? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the first part of an 11th Doctor two-parter called The Rebel Flesh. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Dom, there is great danger. You must take me away. Take me away. Take me away.
Calgon, take me away. Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, Doctor, while you're fiddling with that thing, this sphere's calling up all the Yeti in creation.
Right. This is going to be fun.